This is Join Us in France, episode 58. Hello, I'm Annie, and today we take a look at what Napoleon did to Paris, some of the institutions he started, and the way he transformed France into a modern society. This episode was particularly interesting to me because I don't know a lot of the background information about Napoleon. I know that he went on a lot of battles, and I'm not all that fond of battles, so I probably ignored too much of the Napoleon history lessons. But today, we concentrate on the positive changes he made in France, and there are many actually. Ariane Vilette guides us through this Napoleon tour. She's a lovely young French licensed tour guide who has been working in Paris for 5 years. She also gives us an intriguing restaurant recommendation at the end of the show, a place where you can eat French regional dishes that our grandparents used to love, and I have to admit, I still love them myself, so I've added it to my must-visit list. The show notes for this episode are on joinusinfrance.com/58, and while you're there, click on the social network share buttons at the bottom of the page. I love it when you spread the word. And now, here's the lovely Ariane Vilette. Well, good morning, Ariane. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very well, thank you. It's lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you.
I think you have a very interesting topic, and one of which I know virtually nothing. So it's going to be very interesting for me. But before we get into that, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So actually, I'm a tour guide for the last 5 years. So I'm still young, actually. I'm just 28 years old.
Oh, young one. That's great.
Young lady, young tour guide. And as lots of Parisian, I am not from Paris. You know, this is the tradition. So it is like New Yorkers. They are not from New York.
Yeah.
I come from the Champagne region.
Very good.
Just east of Paris, about 1.5 hours driving from here.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, I realized a few years ago that I was very lucky to live in Champagne because I was drinking champagne for free all the time. At every party there was champagne for free.
Oh, is that what happens? They give it away for free?
Often, at the end of the year, there are always some parties organized in clubs, at schools, etc. And there was always someone bringing champagne because everybody knew a producer, of course. So
very nice.
Well, I didn't do only this. Then I decided to study in Paris. I was from a small city. I decided to go there. I was 18 and I began by a private school, which is named École du Louvre.
Okay.
So it belongs to the Musée du Louvre. It is really related to the Louvre Museum.
Mm-hmm.
It was just art history, so I studied there during 2 years, which was quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went to a university, which is at the west of the city. It is named Nanterre. In France, it is famous, but maybe not abroad. And I got my art history degree there.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, my first idea to work was to be an auctioneer. It was my passion. When I was 12 years old, I decided to be an auctioneer. So you imagine I get back home after school, and one day I was just 12, and I said to my parents, I want to be an auctioneer. So they said, okay, why not? And finally, when I discovered that world, I thought that I was not maybe ready to be an auctioneer.
So I think people are auctioneers, like father and sons kind of things.
Yes, exactly. It is
right.
Really families to families, and to be an auctioneer is very hard. It is very expensive as well because you need to buy a license to find a place where to work, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And some auctioneers, even if they are supposed to be retired, they continue to work.
Mm-hmm.
So for young people, it is not very easy.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, doesn't matter. I'm studying art history, so I want to do something interesting. Because, in France, if you study art history, people think that you will never work at all.
Well, I think that that perception happens in a lot of countries, actually, not just France.
Yes, exactly. So you study art history. Yes, it's very interesting, but why do you study art history? So I thought, I need to find a professional diploma, and I did find it.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to be a tour guide, but in different languages.
Mm-hmm.
Some tour guides are excellent guides, but they work only in French. And I wanted to work in different languages, so I would lots in English, about more than 50% of my time, about 70% of my time I work in English.
Right.
I would French, of course. I have some French customers. We see different exhibitions. So during what we name the high season, it is mostly with people from the Anglo-Saxon countries, such as Canada, Australia, America, and United States, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But during what we name the low season, from October to February, there are lots of exhibitions and private events in the city. So I do that as well, which is a very different way of working because I work in my native language. So I don't explain things in the same way.
Okay, well, let's talk about Napoleon.
Yes.
Big topic.
It's a huge topic. Every year there are hundreds of books published about Napoleon. I'm sure he's one of the most famous person in all the world with Jesus, probably.
True.
Yeah, two most famous persons in the world. And the theme I was interested to talk about is Napoleon, but especially in Paris.
Right.
Because he created so many monuments, he really changed the society. Thanks to him, France changed from the monarchy society, from what we name the Ancient Régime society, and it's right to the modern society. So this is why for me it was really interesting to talk about it, because lots of things we still have in France, such as institutions, official decorations, even law system was created by him. So even if he lived 200 years ago, there are still some prints of his reign in France.
Oh yeah, some definite. I mean, he left his mark everywhere around the country. Even places like Toulouse, where I live, we have some remnants of battles that took place here, Napoleonic battles. So it's he left a big imprint, and of course the law, the whole legal system in France is based on Napoleon and his idea of how things should be run. So
but in France and even in other countries, because as they invaded other countries, the law is more or less the same in countries like Belgium, for example. In Netherlands as well, they had a few connections. So this is why that we are linked by history. Sometimes we have no link at all with some countries, but we know that in all Europe, all of these countries such as Spain, Italy, France, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, Poland, linked by this reign. So it was a very short reign. It was only 15 years, but it marked all Europe for centuries.
Right, and one of the interesting tidbits is that in the U.S., the law is mostly based on English common law.
Exactly.
Except for the state of Louisiana, which has a very different legal system, which is based very strongly on the Napoleonic Code. So it's a very different kind of perspective. Anyway.
So something I like to say is I always ask to my customer, do you know where he was from? Because everybody thinks that he was French, which is true actually. He was born a French person, but he was from an island. He was born on an island. He died on an island. So he was from Corsica, so small French island just south of France, which is a splendid island. There are still a few places to visit there. There's still the house where he was living with his family in Ajaccio. For example.
Yeah, I visited that. It's pretty interesting. It's not very big. You can see it in an hour or an hour and a half, and it's an interesting visit. If you're in Ajaccio, you should definitely stop by.
I didn't do it. I love Napoleon, but I didn't go to Ajaccio yet. When you think about Napoleon, you have to stop in all the little villages to see where he walked and where he went as he crossed all Europe.
I know, he's everywhere.
He was everywhere. So one day I will get to Ajaccio, but actually he was from a noble family. So, when we talk about the nobles, we always had this idea of very rich people who had lots of power, which is partly true for a few families, but for others, they had the title. They were considered as nobles, but they were not very wealthy at all. And it was the case of his family. They were quite poor. There were 8 children. So actually it was decided to send him to France. So when he arrived to France, he was not speaking French at all.
Oh, really?
Corsican. Yep. So we know that all his life he spoke with a little accent. It is like a French person who speaks with an Italian accent.
Right. Right, because Corsican is very close to Italian.
Yes, yeah. So this is what, for example, when he went to Italy, when he invaded Italy, he was really welcomed well by Italian people. For example, when he arrived to Milano, he spoke immediately Italian to them, so they were very proud to listen to French person speaking their language. So
yeah, here I am. I'm here to invade, but at least I can talk your language.
yeah, of course. So it was really helpful for him. So he learned French, but we know that all his life he had, this little exotic accent.
Uh-huh.
So, well, he arrived, he had the traditional teaching, I would say. He went to a military school. There's a building which still exists in Paris. It is just in front of the Eiffel Tower. In front of the Eiffel Tower, there's a big garden named Champ de Mars. Champ de Mars, it's like Mars Fields. And on the other side, there's a long building named Military School, École Militaire.
Yeah.
It was created as military school, and it was really done for these people like Napoleon, who were from nobles families, but they were not wealthy enough to pay teaching. So it was done especially for that sort of people, because being an officer was extremely expensive at that time. In the army, there were two sorts of people. There were the soldiers, but the soldiers had to walk, and the officers needed a horse. It was one of the biggest difference. And some of them, they couldn't buy a horse as it was too expensive. So École Militaire was created for these people. And this is why, for example, when we talk about Champ de Mars, the Mars Field was the place where they were used to train. As there was not the Eiffel Tower, there were not all the buildings around. There was not the country, really like the country. So the name was kept. He studied there, but at the beginning he was not famous at all. But he took advantage of the French Revolution to have a higher grade. And when he was only 24 years old, he became general.
Wow, now that's fast.
That's very fast because usually they were about in the 40s. Now in France they are in the 50s when they become general.
Yeah. I mean, 24 years old and a general already. That's like weird.
It is weird, but if you think about the context, he became general during the French Revolution. And lots of generals, actually all the officers and high officers, they were from the nobility. Lots of nobles were beheaded during the French Revolution, so it was necessary, to get new generals. So I'm not criticizing him, but he was really at the good moment to.
Oh, so yeah, he took advantage of a situation where.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
So, when he was just a general, he was not very famous. He became famous much later. But there were, different systems, I would say. We had the monarchy, then we had the French Revolution. We know when it began. Everybody says the French Revolution began in 1789, which is true, but we don't know when it ended exactly. We're not sure. Some historians say, it ended in 1800, 1805, but we don't know.
Yeah.
So some people say that it ended with him when he became emperor of French people. So this is the very strange aspect because 1799 we had the French Revolution, and in 1804 French people decided to elect him emperor because he didn't take the power by himself. There were different elections, and finally French people decided to have an empire. So more or less like the monarchy, because he decided that his son, only his son, would be the heir of the throne, etc. So he really wanted to have a familiar reign, I would say.
Right, but he got elected, you said?
Yes, he was. On a certain way, yes.
So who voted? I mean, was it just the parliament that was voting for him and the noblemen who?
Not at all French people.
French people?
Yeah. I don't remember exactly the numbers because I'm not good for numbers, but I think when the question was asked, would you like to have Napoleon as an emperor? Millions said yes, like 3 or 5 minutes. It was huge.
Oh, wow.
And about 1,000 said no.
Okay, well, there you go.
It was a huge victory. So, from this little guy from a small island who didn't speak French when he arrived here, but who became a general and finally emperor of French people. It was a.
That's quite the climb.
Exactly, but the problem is when someone becomes so suddenly powerful, very suddenly as well, he loses the power. So this is what happened to him. But about the theme, I was interested to talk about this morning, Napoleon and Paris, or Napoleon in Paris. The interesting thing is, Napoleon is famous for the battles that he did.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to talk about the battles. It is not the topic of this morning. I'm more interested to see what he did in a city like Paris, because for him, Paris was the most beautiful city in all Europe, and he wanted to do of Paris the most beautiful city which could exist. So, well, we always say that before Napoleon there was nothing, which is not true. There were some monuments, but the organization was very different. We had some monuments like Notre Dame Cathedral, of course, the Louvre. Alors, the Louvre was not a museum. He decided to make part of the Louvre as a museum, but it didn't have the shape that we know now, because now when we arrive, we see a huge building with two very large wings. It was not this. It was much more smaller. There were a few streets, there were a few avenues, like Champs-Élysées Avenue, it was existing, but once I remember, I had bought a map of Paris before Napoleon.
I'll try to find one like that. That would be interesting, I think.
I can take a picture if you want. I can send it to you. But
very good, very good. Yeah, please.
So hard to understand. Really, I was thinking that where am I? Where are these buildings? Paris was much smaller. I would say, if you know the arrondissement, now we have 20 arrondissements. It was the equivalent of maybe 6, 7 arrondissements.
Oh, wow.
A very small city, lots of parts were like fields. For example, the Champs-Élysées were fields. This is why actually it is named Champs-Élysées. Champs means the fields. It was almost a kitchen garden.
Oh, wow.
When you arrive now, you don't think about it.
No, you wouldn't picture it that way.
Okay. Really, it's a very interesting map. The best is to see a modern map of the city now and this old map, and then you think, oh my God.
Yeah.
It is nothing to compare. So the big problem that he had, though, he created some monuments, but especially he organized the city as we know now. So, for example, one of the biggest problems, there were not very large streets. Now, when we go to Paris, we talk about the boulevard. Everybody knows the boulevard.
Sure.
So, this very large street with lots of theaters and restaurants. It didn't exist at that time. And there were some streets. One is extremely famous in the city. It is named Rue de Rivoli.
Yes.
Rue de Rivoli crosses the city from the east to the west. But at that time, there was nothing. He's the one who decided to create Rue de Rivoli, for example. It's an anecdote. When you are on Rue de Rivoli, there are lots of places to eat, cafes, etc. But when he created it, he wanted to have a very safe street and a very clean street. So this is why he didn't want to have any baker or any butcher, because that it would be dangerous. A baker has an oven, so it can cause a fire. And the butcher, has lots of blood, but it's a very dirty job. So he didn't want to have any smell, nothing like this in that street. And actually, it is still applied. There's no baker, no butcher at all in Rue de Rivoli.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I was reading recently that bakeries used to be extremely dangerous. They used to catch on fire because they didn't have proper ventilation. And so all the flour dust and the ovens would create fires. The dust in the bakery could catch on fire pretty easily. So yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that, but it used to be one of the most dangerous places one could work. and butchers, obviously, it's the blood and it
smells bad. It is disgusting.
Yeah.
So you didn't want to have anything like this.
And still today, you don't have them on Rue de Rivoli. How interesting.
No, nothing. But just about the bakers, for example, in London, they had a huge fire in London in 1666 due to the bakery.
Oh, wow.
So when people go to London, they all know this detail because of a dangerous bakery. So it explains this. Especially, he created something which is now considered as completely normal in France. He created numbers in the streets. Because, before there was nothing. So we have some testimonies of people that were walking the street, and they wanted to find a restaurant, for example. They could never find it because there was no number. So they had to guess where they were. For example, if the name of the restaurant was the Three Bears restaurant. There was a painting above the door of Three Bears, but it was not very helpful.
Huh.
So we know that sometimes they were turning 2 or 3 hours to find the place where to go. So he decided to create some numbers.
Sounds like me without a GPS.
Yeah, without a GPS, it was not very helpful. Some numbers were like GPS. But in some countries, I know that sometimes in the street you can find big numbers like 1,000, for example. It happens in some countries. In France, he thought that it was too big. You are on a street, you don't want to have so many numbers. There's one street, which is a very old one in Paris, which is named Rue Saint-Honoré.
Yes.
It's considered as a luxury street. And Rue Saint-Honoré has until about 500, but it is the only street like this in the city. All the others go to 100, more or less. But the problem was how to organize these numbers.
Yeah.
So he decided that on one side, on the street, on the right side on the street, the numbers 2, 4, 6, 8, etc. would be on the right side. And on the left side, all the numbers such as 3, 5, 7, 9 would be there.
So odd and even numbers are on opposite sides of the street.
Exactly.
And it's still like that in most places.
It is still like that. Exactly. So it is very helpful.
Yeah, it's a handy.
It helps a lot to understand where you are, and especially he wanted the numbers to be painted on the facade. So in all the streets created before him, sometimes you can find the name of a street which is engraved on the facade. It is not painted. It is engraved. Yeah. So sometimes it's quite interesting to see the old name of a street engraved on the wall, and then above this blue plaque which gives the name of a street.
Mm-hmm.
When you walk in the city, you don't think about it, of course, but it's created by him. And as well, he created something very important, but which didn't exist at all before. It was the pavement.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Everybody walks on the pavement now.
Yeah.
But before there was nothing. We know that the streets were very dirty.
So they were paved with like flat rocks, or?
It was the problem because he wanted to be paved by cobblestones.
Okay, cobblestones, yeah.
But cobblestones were quite expensive, so it was done only in the center of the city. But it was very long to do it. So we know that they were walking on the ground. So imagine when it was raining, it was extremely dirty.
Oh yeah, it's awful, yeah.
It was absolutely disgusting.
Yeah.
But especially, now everybody walks, of course. All the different social classes walks. But there was a time the streets were so dirty that there was a sort of, not exactly a law, but it existed since the medieval ages. The poor had to walk in the middle of the street, and the rich had to walk on the side of the walls.
Okay, then.
You will understand why, no worries. Because, when people were throwing things from their home, they were throwing the garbages from home. Garbages were arriving in the middle of a street. So this is why the poor had to walk there, when the rich had the privilege to walk really close to the buildings, so they would be protected from the garbages.
Wow.
It's a French expression which is very hard to translate, but in French it is tenir le haut du pavé.
Oh yeah.
Tenir le haut du pavé. So it would be something like to be on the top of a pavement.
Right. In English, you can say you take the wall, which means that you walk close to the wall.
Okay.
Yeah.
It comes from that moment.
Oh.
So dirty. So the thing he decided was, okay, we have to create pavements. We really have to separate the place where the horse carriages are and the pedestrians are. And as well, he created sewers.
That I'm glad to hear about.
And sewers were existing, sewers were invented by the Romans during the antiquity, but it was never really applied.
Right. If you don't have it, you.
It's a bit hard. It's a bit disgusting. So
yeah.
Now, Paris is famous for its sewers. Sometimes we have movies done in the sewers, so you can even visit them.
Mm-hmm.
Smelling tour, but it's interesting. It is close to the Eiffel Tower. It is written. You can visit the sewers and you can see a portion and how it was created, etc. So actually, as I was telling you about the garbages, everything was outside.
Yeah.
So too dirty, too smelling, and especially it was transmitting epidemics.
Oh yeah, it's awful.
So he decided to create it, but under the street. But in old cities, like in medieval cities, when you walk, sometimes you can see the way it was shaped. You can see that the middle of a street doesn't have the same shape. There's like a sort of a canal, which is in the middle of the street, and this is where all the garbages, the blood, the water, etc., were going down.
Yuck.
So
did he put a sewer all through Paris or only some parts of Paris?
In some parts of Paris, because he reigned only 50 years, so he didn't have the time to do everything that he wanted. But he's really the one who brought the sewers. Now the sewers in France, in Paris, there's a sewer on every road you are walking. So under every road, every street, there's all the time a sewer.
Of course, yeah.
So it is extremely well organized. We even say that the sewers, they are so long that it is like the distance between Paris and Istanbul.
Oh wow.
Well, it is huge, but it was really the beginning. As he didn't have time to do lots of things, he just brought this modern system. For example, I was talking about the Louvre and the Tuileries. Sometimes I have some customers, they ask me, but why it is named Jardin des Tuileries, the Tuileries Garden?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Okay.
You're going to tell me, I hope.
Yeah. I know. The name comes from tuile.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, you're from Toulouse, you have lots of tuiles.
Yeah, those are the roof tiles.
Exactly, roof tiles, because centuries ago there was a fabric of tiles.
Oh.
And so tuile in French gave Tuileries, but actually there were two palaces. There was the Louvre. So Louvre, as I told you, it was quite a small palace, and there was the Tuileries Palace. So when you walk, you see the Louvre, the pyramid, and the Tuileries Garden, and you see these huge wings. And a lot of people don't understand why these wings are so big. Actually, they were created to make the connection between the Louvre on one side and the Tuileries Palace on the other side. So it explains why these wings were so big. But actually, he lived in the Tuileries. He lived in that palace. And now the palace doesn't exist anymore. There's nothing. Because we had a very bloody revolution. We had lots of revolution. 4 revolutions, and one was in 1870, 1871. It is named La Commune de Paris. And during La Commune, it was decided to burn this building. And I have to mention that my great-great-grandfather was part of this revolution.
Oh, yeah.
So I always like to imagine that he burned this monument. I don't know, but this is part of a family legend.
Wow.
So when he was living there, it is very close to the River Seine. So he was looking at the Seine, and there were not so many bridges. Now Paris has 37 bridges, but there was a time there were maybe 4 or 5 bridges, so nothing. And especially the deck didn't exist. It was like the beach.
Oh, wow.
It's not like a beach, so people were going down very slowly to the water.
Yeah. And
they could, take things from the boats, etc. But it was not really created. So we have a very funny story because, lots of people talked about Napoleon in their memories. And once it was one of his generals, and his general wrote a comment about it. This general was looking from the window. He was looking at the River Seine, and Napoleon arrived. He saw him and he said, "Come on, you are still watching the girls?" And he said, "Yes, I would like to watch the girls, but I'm not looking at this at all. I'm just looking at the River Seine. There's no deck at all. There's no bridge, and the water is dirty." Napoleon watched it and he said, "You're right. Tomorrow we have to begin a new bridge." So a very quick man, he was, even when he was in campaign, when he was in Russia, for example, when he was in Austria and Poland, he was all the time thinking about how to make Paris a more beautiful city.
How did he get the money to do all this?
How did he get the money? Interesting question. From the taxes.
Taxes, okay.
Probably. So this was done, and
it would be really hard today for a a French president or a president of most countries to say, yeah, I'm taxing you to death, but it's because I'm building these nice bridges and monuments in Paris.
We still pay a lot of taxes in France.
Yes, but they don't go to building a lot of. They build roads and bridges all over the country, not just in Paris.
Maybe they were thinking on a different way.
Yeah.
So for them it was maybe normal, but he even changed the Louvre. When I read descriptions about the Louvre, I went to the Louvre outside. I couldn't understand what I was reading. It was too hard. For example, we know that there were lots of little houses. So imagine the Louvre, a splendid pyramid. Behind, there's a square, which is named Cour Carrée. Square. We know that there were some houses there, some artists living there. It was really creepy. It was a disgusting place. Now when we go there, it is one of the most beautiful places in all the city. There was a time it was at night. We know that it was a bit
grungy.
Yeah. So he decided, to completely change around the Louvre. So now Louvre is famous for his beautiful proportions. It is a very harmonic building, which is true. There was a time, one building had that size, another one had another size, so it looked like anything actually. Yeah. So this is why he decided to make this beautiful building, and especially he created Musée du Louvre.
Of course.
Musée du Louvre is one of the oldest building in all, one of the oldest museum in all Europe. So now it is considered as the biggest museum in the world, with Heritage Museum in St. Petersburg and Metropolitan Museum in New York. But actually the thing he did, so we can talk on different ways, but when he was going on his campaign, he was used to take works of art or to steal works of art. It depends how you see things. But he really wanted to make Paris capital of the arts. Before it was Rome. Rome was considered as center of the arts, as it was place of the Roman civilization, place of the Renaissance, of the Baroque as well. So he really wanted to show that Paris was this capital of the arts. So he took lots of statues, lots of paintings. So at the end of the reign, some of them came back to their original countries, but some of them stayed there. For example, there's one huge painting. When people visit the Louvre Museum, of course, they see Mona Lisa, done by Leonardo da Vinci. In front of this huge of Mona Lisa, there's a huge painting which is named Cana's Wedding.
Yes.
Cana's Wedding, done by the Italian painter Veronese. It is absolutely big painting. In meters, it is 7 meters on 10 meters.
Oh, wow.
Which is about, how much is it in feet? Like 30 feet?
Oh, yeah, it's 3 feet to a meter, so you multiply by 3.
Okay, so bigger than my flat.
You live in Paris, that's why.
I live in Paris, so I live in a shoebox.
Yes.
But there is this absolutely big painting, and sometimes people ask me, but it is an Italian painting, so why is it in France? There's always a reason. And actually, when Napoleon went to Venice, this painting was located in the convent. It was decided to roll the painting, as it was made on canvas, to roll it and then to bring it to Paris. So at the end of the empire, for some pieces of art, as they were too fragile, it was decided to keep them in Paris. So as an exchange, France gave a French painting and could keep that one. So this one is definitely one of the most famous. Another group, there's a little building, a little Arch of Triumph. We have 2 Arch of Triumph. We have the big one, which is at the end of Champs-Élysées. We have another one, which is named Arc de Triomphe du Carrousel. So between the 2 wings of the Louvre is this small Arch of Triumph.
Yeah, so it's small,
It is, well, it is not small, but compared to the big one, it is considered as small. And this one was created after a battle, after Austerlitz battle, which is his most famous battle. And as well, he was very fast. So he talked to his ministers, and it was about 11 in the evening. And he said, tomorrow at 5 in the morning, people have to begin to build this Arch of Triumph.
To show that I won.
Yeah. So the next day, some people arrived and they say, but why are there 500 people working in that place? What are they doing? And they say, you don't know Napoleon is going to create a new Arch of Triumph. So,
Wow.
always very quick. Didn't want to lose his time, but on the top of his Arch of Triumph there are four horses.
Okay.
Four beautiful bronze horses. I saw these horses when I was in Venice, in Saint Mark Basilica. It is really famous for these four horses because they come from Rome. They have a very long history. They were made in Rome in the third or fourth century, something like this. Then they were brought to Istanbul, which was named Byzance at that time. Then they went to Venice, and then Napoleon took them and brought them to Paris.
They are beautiful. I'm looking at them now.
Yeah, it is really interesting work of art for the bronze technique, of course, but as well for the history as they traveled everywhere in Europe. So they arrived to Paris. Some pieces of art were extremely famous because they were engraved, for example. So someone who had a little bit of knowledge in art immediately was able to recognize these four horses.
Uh-huh.
Stayed in Paris during a few years, but finally they were brought back to Venice. So now we just have copies on the top, and they had the originals.
Huh. It's beautiful. So they gave back the originals.
Yes. Some things stayed in France, but most of the pieces of art that they brought, most of them came back to their original countries. Especially Italy. And for example, he even had taken the archives. Archives. For example, he took the archives of the Vatican.
Oh.
So thousands of archives. He even had the plan to create a special building for this. Now in front of the Eiffel Tower, I told you that on the one side there's the military school. The other side of the River Seine, there are two buildings. There are two museums, and the place is named the Trocadero.
Sure.
And actually, he had the plan to create a building close to the Trocadero to put his archives somewhere. So he never had the time, so it was never finished. Unfortunately, the building was never created, but he even had this plan, to really centralize everything in Paris. Once I was talking to a curator. He organized, I think it was about 2 years ago, an exhibition about Napoleon, and he was saying that Napoleon created Europe. So what? Because for us, Europe is just a group of different countries which work together. This is the way we see Europe since the 1950s.
Sure.
And it is a different way because he created Europe in the sense that Paris was the center of Europe.
Oh wow!
So this is this new thing that he created. So really, lots of things that now we're so used to seeing were created by him. Even for example, the fountains. Paris is famous for the fountains.
Yes.
Not as famous as Rome, of course.
Yes.
Rome has splendid fountains, but Paris has a little bit because there was no running water at all. During centuries, as there were not the sewers, of course there was not running water. So we know that some people, they were paid just to bring water from the fountain to a private house, for example. And he created more and more fountains. He thought that it was important for the citizens to have water just 1 minute walking, for example.
Bring the water close, yeah.
Exactly. So you see all these practical things were really created or developed by him.
Yeah, we can't really imagine Paris without sewers and without running water and all of that. I mean, he didn't bring the running water, but he brought the fountains closer to the people, which was a first step, I guess.
Running water was much later. I think it was maybe the end of the 19th century. But just the beginning of something was done by him.
Yeah. And street numbers and pavements, all of these things are, I mean, fundamental to life as we know it in the West, anyway.
But a few days ago, for example, I was talking to teenagers, and I told them that the high school was created by him.
Yes.
They were, what? But how was it before? And, teaching was so different because there were a few schools, of course, but most of the schools belonged to religious.
Yeah, they were religious schools, yes.
They still have a name. So there are still some very famous schools which exist, but originally they belong to this religious, and especially lots of people didn't go to school at all. Now school is an obligation. It is an obligation to go to school until the age of 16, but this was applied much later in the 1850s or 70s. I don't remember. But concept of high school, and we have something very famous every year. We talk about it, the baccalaureate.
Yes.
The bachelor degree, I would say.
No, baccalaureate is a high school diploma.
Okay.
But it's very codified. So it's yeah. There's nothing similar in America. Some kids do end their high school with a baccalaureate, is what they call it. But most kids just get a high school diploma. But in France, it's called the baccalaureate, and Napoleon invented it.
Yes. Yeah. So since 1800, 1802, I think we have a baccalaureate. So when the pupils get it, they don't think that it was created 200 years ago. So
Yep.
even, for example, a military order that still exists. Well, now it is partly military, partly civil. It is the Légion d'honneur.
Aha. Yes.
Legion of Honor. It was created by him as well. So, for example, when people go to Musée d'Orsay, this beautiful Orsay museum in front of Musée d'Orsay, there's a little museum that nobody visits. But it is quite interesting. It is about the different military orders because, society changed so much during the French Revolution. For example, there were some orders given to the nobles, for example, the Saint Spirit Order, and things like this. And during the French Revolution, people wanted to have a more equal society. So for this reason, they decided to not have any order anymore.
Oh, so they got rid of the orders.
Yes. So there was nothing, And finally, he thought that it would be interesting to give some medal sometimes. He said, soldiers need a medal. They need something. So this is why.
Yeah, medals are important.
It is quite important. It's a way to show that you are brave. So at the beginning, it was only done for the soldiers. In France now we say that everybody has it because lots of writers have it. Even the football team have it. When France.
Well, yeah, but not everybody has a Légion d'honneur.
This is a French expression, when I say my French customer, they say, yeah, but everybody has it. And I say, no, I don't have it.
That's right. And neither do they.
No, neither do they. So created by him as well.
So he made a huge difference in French life, that's for sure. And we've explored that quite well.
Yeah.
Now, we've been talking a long time and we haven't gotten to any of the monuments that so do you want to briefly tell us about some of the monuments that you can visit in Paris that have to do with Napoleon?
Alors, about the monuments, he transformed some monuments, for example, but he created some monuments. For example, in Place Vendôme. Place Vendôme is famous for this jewelers. Now, it's very close to the Tuileries Garden. Well, the place was created much before him, but there's a column which is named the Colonne Vendôme. Colonne Vendôme was created by him, for example.
Ah, okay.
So, now, if you go to Paris next week, you won't see the Colonne Vendôme at all. It is on restoration, so we hope to see something more clean in a few months. But Colonne Vendôme was created just after a battle. I talked about Austerlitz battle.
Yeah.
When he won Austerlitz, he decided to take the cannons of the enemies. So this battle was against Russians and Austrians. So he took the cannons, about 1,200 cannons, brought that to France, and he decided to melt them down, make this huge column. So people, for example, who are familiar with Rome, there's a column which was made by an emperor. His name was Trajan, and he created the Trajan column.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same shape, exactly the same size, same organization. It represents the battle, except Trajan was representing his own battle. Napoleon represented the Austerlitz battle. So actually, it is not made only of bronze. The structure is made of stone. It is possible to climb Well, I never met someone who climbed the top of this column, but I know it's possible to do it.
From the inside, there's a staircase?
Yes.
Ah,
yeah.
Okay.
But sometimes people can do it, but I think it is every 20 years. But it is a tiny, tiny step. But actually, it was destroyed as well. So it was restored. But during the same revolution I was talking about, 1870, 1871, it was decided to destroy it. So that's why when you see it, it looks like it was cut into different pieces as it was completely knocked down. So there are different statues on the top. There were about 4 different statues because when he made this column, he was emperor. Statue of him. But after his defeat, France came back to monarchy during a few years.
Yes.
So the monarchy didn't want to have any statue of him, so they decided to remove this statue and to have a fleur de lis, the traditional symbol of the monarchy. But we had the empire again, done by his nephew, Napoleon III. So it was decided to have a new statue, etc., etc. So just history of it on the top is quite funny. So it is one of the places as well. He created a church. Now it is a church. It is a Catholic church. La Madeleine.
Yes.
La Madeleine, which is close to Tuileries Garden, close to Place de la Concorde. He created that building. So actually, it is exactly the same shape, same size as the Parthenon in Athens.
Parthenon in Athens. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that.
It is almost exactly the same size. When you see a building in Paris, if it is influenced by the antiquity, you can be sure at 99% that it was created by Napoleon.
Napoleon had a thing for antiquity, huh?
He loved it. You see that church, but it was created for his soldiers.
Okay.
A temple dedicated to his soldiers. And finally, when he was defeated, the church was not finished at all, so people didn't really know what to do with it. So this is why finally they decided to end it, but to make a Catholic church. And another building I was talking about a little bit before is the Arc de Triomphe, the big one.
Yes, the Arc du Triomphe du Carrousel. Oh, the big one too. Okay.
Big one. The big one for baby is Arc de Triomphe du Carrousel.
Right.
The big one is Arc de Triomphe, the white one. And this one as well was created to homage his soldiers and all his army that he had created. He had created what we name La Grande Armée. La Grande Armée, so the Great Army. It was the biggest army of the world at that time. For example, when he went to Russia in 1812, when he went to Moscow, he went with his great army. We don't know exactly how many people were there, but we think about 500,000 soldiers.
Wow, so that's a lot of people.
Huge army. And as well, when he was defeated, he didn't see the end of the Arc de Triomphe. So actually, when his body came back, it is another story, but when his body came back, it was decided to organize a walk in all the city, and now he's buried at Les Invalides, Museum of the Army. But there was a huge walk organized, and actually his coffin did a stop under the Arch of Triumph to homage him on a certain way, went to the Champs-Élysées and then arrived to Les Invalides. So, but there are lots of buildings, of course, but these 3 ones are definitely the most famous buildings created by him.
Yeah, and the Madeleine, I'm just looking at it. I had forgotten what it looks like, but it really looks like the Parthenon. I mean, it looks like a Greek building. It doesn't look like a Catholic church at all.
No, not at all.
Does it work like a church?
It is a church.
It is a church. Okay.
It is a church. Remember, we had a very famous singer, Dalida. Dalila.
Yeah.
Dalida,
yeah.
Dalida, she sang lots of languages.
Pop songs, yeah.
In 1987, her religious ceremony was done in La Madeleine.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So we have la Place Vendôme, l'Arc de Triomphe Carrousel, l'Arc de Triomphe, the big one.
Yeah.
L'Étoile.
Alors, Place de l'Étoile, the Star Place, yes, it was partly created by him.
Okay.
But he definitely created the monument, but not especially the place around.
Okay, all right. Are there any more?
Hello. This is really the most important. Well, he modernized the Louvre. It was already existing. As creation, I would say yes. Yes.
Wow.
Purely creation.
So you could really go on a tour with Ariane and ask her to take you to all these places that Napoleon created and have more details about the history and all of that. Sounds like there's plenty to see.
There's plenty to see, and especially in Les Invalides, because there's a beautiful section dedicated to Napoleon. They show lots of paintings, personal objects. So it is quite well done, but especially his tomb.
Sure.
As now he's buried at Les Invalides. So I told you that he was born on an island and died in an island. So most of the time people confuse. They think that he died in Elba, which is not true. He was sent to Elba because 1814 was the end of the empire. So it was decided to send him in Elba. And in Elba, he did exactly the same thing that he did in Paris. He modernized Elba.
Huh.
So he created roads, he created a hospital, which didn't exist. He really organized, decided, was governor of Elba. But he came back to France during what we named the 100 Days. And 1815, this was the end. Definitely the end of his reign. So, for example, if you are interested, there's a great movie to watch. It is not a recent movie, but it is really well done. It is named Waterloo. Waterloo, it was done in 1970. So the name of the director is not pronounceable at all. Budartuk or something like this. But if you have a movie Waterloo done in 1970, you can watch it in the show this incredible battle.
I'll put a link to it in the show notes too, because that would be really interesting.
Definitely, it is quite a good movie to see. But finally, 1815, it was Waterloo, so his biggest defeat. So he was sent, but that's a problem for British, I would say, because the British never recognized him as an emperor. They always said that he was a general, so they just saw him as a military. So normally, when a military accepted to stop the fight, Napoleon decided to constitute himself prisoner of the British. When a general was doing that, he had the right to live in the country. So as doing that, he thought that he would live in England with a few friends, with his wife, for example. But actually, he didn't have it like this, and he was sent to an island, which is still British, and it is named St. Helena Island.
Oh.
So St. Helena, if you have a look on the map, it is in the middle of nowhere. It is in the Atlantic Ocean. On one side, there's Brazil. On the other side, but kilometers away, very far away, it is Africa. So it is a really horrible island because it is very wet. It's windy all the time. Even when people go now to St. Helena, there's no flight at all. So they need to stop somewhere in Africa, and then they need to take a boat during days, and they arrive to St. Helena. So,
oh, wow. So it's really in the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere. So you imagine the most powerful man of Europe arriving to this island. So it was a very hard life for him.
My British friend, that was not nice. That wasn't nice.
Not really. There's another very good movie. It is a French movie, but I think you can find it in English. The title is the same in English. It is Monsieur N. Monsieur N was done in 2003 by the director Antoine de Caunes.
Okay.
And well, if you don't know what happened in St. Helena, it is a bit hard to understand because there are a lot of characters. But if you know a little bit the context, who was with him and what was happening, it is excellent movie. Well, it's fantasy, of course.
It's a movie, I mean.
Yeah, it's a movie, but the actor who plays Napoleon is just excellent. And, there's a theory which is all the time mentioned. When I have French customers, they always ask me at the end of a Napoleon tour, was he poisoned or not? I always say,
was he?
I don't know. because I was not there. But there are lots of suspicions because some people said that he was poisoned with arsenic. But the problem, if you are poisoned with arsenic, there are some symbols which show that you were poisoned. For example, there are very brown dots on the hands here. Then the color of the skin turns brown, for example. Arsenic is quite a good poison if you want to kill someone because it doesn't smell anything. It is a powder, so if you put it in wine, for example, you don't smell, you don't see anything. So there was a theory like this because we still have some hair of Napoleon. There are still a few fragments. And there were some analyses done and some traces of arsenic were found. But actually, we think that he was not because he didn't have all of his signs. And we think that he had some arsenic in his hair because, at that time, heating was done with fire and the windows were never opened.
Oh, so bad ventilation.
Maybe it was due to this. This is the only theory we found. Officially, we say that he died of stomach cancer. It's probably true because his father died of stomach cancer. So, voilà.
Yeah.
Maybe due to his father, he had the same sickness.
And how old was he when he died?
He was
more or less.
He was 56, I think.
Okay, 56. So he didn't die very old.
Not very old, no.
He got a lot done.
He had an incredible life, but actually when he died, as he was president of the British, he was buried, of course, on Saint Helena Island, and on the slab it was written General Bonaparte. 20 years after his death, 20 years after, there were still lots of people who would remember him in France. They were still his old soldiers.
Of course.
So at that time, the government decided to bring back the body. They wanted to have a myth. They wanted to have someone that everybody would know in France, and it was Napoleon. So this is why a boat was sent to Saint Helena. Then the body came back, did a huge tour in France. It arrived to Normandy, the west coast of France, then to the River Seine, as the River Seine ends in Normandy. So they went through the River Seine and arrived to Paris, and now he's buried at Les Invalides. So Les Invalides, when you go there, there's an extract of his testimony, of his last wills, and it is written, in English it is, I desire that my ashes rest close to the River Seine among these French people I loved so much. Like this.
Wow.
So, well, of course, he was not burnt. When you say ashes, it is just an elegant way to talk about body.
Yeah.
But it explains why he's buried now in Les Invalides. So I would say that definitely the best place to see what he did is Paris, even if there are some other residences around, residences where he lived. Paris is an excellent point to begin a tour about Napoleon.
So tell us a little bit about a typical tour that you would give about Napoleon.
About Napoleon, I think I would begin by the Louvre, as it is in the center of the city. So it is quite good to see the different changes that he did around the Louvre. It is possible then to see this arch, Arc du Carrousel, arch, to see Rue de Rivoli, which is just very nearby. So to see how Paris was created by him, as there are all these different concepts I was talking about. It's possible to see most of them. And then I like to walk until Colonne Vendôme. I don't know if it is not possible to see it at the moment. It will be soon. So Place Vendôme, then walking until Arc de Triomphe, or taking metro, as it is a bit far, to see the big Arc de Triomphe, the military school, of course, where he studied. This is not a very impressive building, but just to mention it, and especially Les Invalides, as he died there. So I would say the Louvre, Madeleine Church, Place Vendôme, Arc de Triomphe.
Now you just said he died at Les Invalides. No, he's buried at Les Invalides.
Sorry.
Yeah.
He's buried at Les Invalides. Excuse me. So of course it depends on how much time people have.
Right.
Suppose I'm able to do it in 4 hours or like in a day. Sometimes I did it in a day. If it is in a day, sometimes I go to this museum I was talking about, this very tiny museum about the different military orders. So this one is for free, so it is an advantage, and it's possible to see all these different orders. Um, so it's quite a good point of view. And of course, on the way, there are different places to see, where his mother was living, for example. Now it is a ministry, so it's not possible to go inside. But, even on the way, there are all the time little residences where one of his family members was living.
So do you have a favorite restaurant or cafe that you take your customers to?
For this tour or in general?
In general.
In general, there's a restaurant I definitely love. It is really famous now for French people. In the French movie OSS 117, OSS 117.
Yeah.
Jardin. They are in a restaurant, and they eat traditional food. And actually, it was done in that restaurant I love. It is named Auberge Pyrénées Cévennes.
Auberge Pyrénées Cévennes. Huh.
Rue de la Folie Méricourt. So it is not in the center of the city, but it is definitely the food I love because the staff is very nice, very friendly, and especially it is all the good food I know. It's the food of my grandparents. When I go there, it's like if it was, very traditional food. I love their meat, so it is definitely one of my favorites. Auberge
So do you I suppose when you do a whole day tour with your customers, you're going to stop at a cafe or you're going to have lunch somewhere? Or...
It always depends on my customers. Of course, I have some ideas, but sometimes I just want to grab a sandwich. So in this case, we go to a bakery, and then we like to sit on gardens to enjoy the sun. Sometimes they prefer to sit in a very casual restaurant. So it always depends on them. I have to say I have my list of restaurants, but then I would say it's up to them.
Do you go pick up people at their hotel, or do you meet them somewhere?
As they prefer. Most of the time, I meet there at the hotel. To find. Sometimes they ask me if they can meet me in front of a museum, for example. So as well, it is like they want. I think a good thing is to meet them at the hotel, so they are sure, to find me.
Yeah. It's easier to find you at their hotel than at the entrance of some big place or museum or whatever. Yeah. So if people want to book a tour with you, how do they get a hold of you? Do you want to share your email address or website or something?
And my email address is ariane.villette yahoo.com .fr, pardon, fr.
Yahoo.fr.
Ariane Vilette, all linked. I'm sorry, it's hard to say in English. Ariane Vilette, all linked. Then at yahoo.fr. But I will write you my email address.
You said Ariane.Vilette, right?
Oh, sorry. Excuse me. As it is in English, it's hard. No, it is Ariane Vilette.
No dot?
No dot.
No dot, okay.
Sorry. Ariane Vilette.
At yahoo.fr.
Yahoo.fr. Or otherwise, there's a great website which is named Viator. Viator.
Yeah.
Viator, if you have a look on the Viator guides, you have to write Viator guides. Then you select the different cities. So you select Paris, and I am on this website, Ariane.
Okay. And I'll put a link to that as well, so that people can find you easily.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I told you at the beginning, I don't know very much about Napoleon. For some reason, maybe I was asleep in school or maybe they didn't talk about it. I don't know, but I really know very little about Napoleon. And every time I find out a little bit, I find like he was an interesting person, a bit of very aggressive towards other countries.
In such a way, yes.
Yeah, but he certainly molded French life in his image. I mean, he really had a vision, and like you pointed out a few times, he wanted to get things done quickly, and was a very dynamic kind of leader.
Definitely.
Which is really hard for me to think about, because French people are so slow to do anything. Typically, I think French people are like, oh, well, I'll do this. And then 6 months later, they tell you, I'll do this. And, and they might do it eventually, but they think about it for a very long time. Maybe he wasn't like that at all.
Yeah, that's right. He was, I would say, a unicorn person. Very different. But I think he's interesting to discover, not only in Paris, of course, but his personality as well is interesting too.
Yeah. A very fascinating person.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Ariane, for sharing all that with us. I hope you get lots of people calling you and booking tours with you, because you sound like you know your stuff, and it would be very fun to get to know Paris with that angle. I think there's plenty to see there.
Thank you for your time, Annie.
Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Au revoir. This brings us to the end of another episode of the Join Us in France Travel Podcast. You can find us at joinusinfrance.com. We love to hear from listeners. Don't be shy. If you're a tour guide or travel professional in France and would like to appear on the show, write to Annie at joinusinfrance.com. And if you love this show, please support it. Go to joinusinfrance.com/support for details. Thank you. Au revoir.